In the heart of Apeyori village, a land surrounded by thick forests and ancient rivers, lived a man named Akinwale, known to all simply as Akin. He was strong, hard-working, and respected, but he carried a burden heavy enough to break his back: poverty. No matter how hard Akin worked, his farm refused to yield. His yams rotted beneath the soil, his cassava dried up, and even his goats refused to give milk. Each evening, he watched other villagers return home with baskets full of harvest, while he dragged his feet through dust with empty hands. Soon, whispers began to follow him. Akin is cursed. Poverty sleeps on his mat. Those words pierced his heart like arrows. He longed for wealth, not just for himself, but for his wife Ayubami and their little daughter, Damile. One day, after a particularly painful harvest season, Akin sat outside his hut staring at the setting sun. His face was covered in lines of worry. Then, as if drawn by fate, an old man, Baba Aini, the oldest storyteller in the village, passed by and sat beside him. Baba Aini noticed Akin's sorrow and said in a low, mysterious voice, "The forest knows your pain. But remember, wealth has paths, and not all are meant to be walked." Akin frowned. "What do you mean, Baba?" The old man leaned closer and whispered, "In the deep forest lives a being, half spirit, half shadow. They call him Egbèrè, the spirit who weeps at night. He carries a mat, and whoever takes that mat becomes rich beyond imagination." Akin's eyes widened. Baba Aini continued, "But this mat is called the mat of tears, because anyone who steals it will never know true rest. The wealth comes, yes, but the spirit follows with endless sorrow." Akin's heart beat faster. Wealth, finally within reach. He listened eagerly as Baba Aini finished. "If you ever hear Egbèrè crying in the forest at night, run. Do not look back." But Akin heard only one thing: wealth. For days, Akin's mind would not rest. He imagined himself in fine clothes, his compound filled with cattle, his family living in abundance, villagers praising him. Soon, the stories of fear became stories of opportunity. And the opportunity grew until greed swallowed caution. Finally, one night, when the moon was thin and pale, Akin whispered to himself, "If Egbèrè's mat brings wealth, then I will take it. Poverty has shamed me enough." He packed a small bag, a lantern, a cutlass, and kola nuts to strengthen his spirit. Ayubami asked him where he was going, but he only said, "I must fight for our future." She didn't understand, but fear clung to her heart like a shadow. Akin entered the sacred forest as crickets chirped and owls hooted. The trees were tall, ancient, and thick like walls around him. A strange wind blew, carrying whispers that begged him to turn back. After hours of wandering, he sat under a palm tree to rest. Then, he heard it. A cry. Not the cry of a child. Not the cry of an animal. But a wailing so sorrowful it twisted the heart. A deep, mournful sound that echoed through the night. The cry grew louder, closer, heavier. Suddenly, from behind a cluster of dark trees, a tiny figure emerged. Barely the height of Akin's waist, with a skinny frame, tangled hair, and glowing eyes that flickered like dying flames. It was Egbèrè. He walked barefoot, dragging a small mat behind him, a mat woven from strange fibers of gold and shadow. Tears streamed down his face, falling to the forest floor like drops of moonlight. Akin froze. The spirit did not threaten him. Instead, he sat on the ground, curled around the mat, and cried harder, wailed like someone who had lost everything. That was when Akin noticed it. The mat shimmered. It glowed faintly with gold. Wealth beyond imagination. Akin's heartbeat raced. He whispered to himself, "This is my chance." Ignoring Baba Ieni's warning, Akin bravely, or foolishly, stepped forward. Slowly, silently, he crept behind the spirit. He counted his breaths. He raised his trembling hands. He reached for the shining mat. The moment Akin's fingers touched the mat, the forest fell silent. No wind. No birds. No insects. The spirit stopped crying instantly and turned its head slowly, unnaturally, until its glowing eyes met Akin's. Thunder boomed without lightning. The spirit screamed, a scream so sharp that Akin staggered back in fear. He grabbed the mat and ran. Egbèrè's voice echoed through the forest. "You have taken my tears." Akin ran blindly, his legs heavy, his breath burning. Behind him, he heard footsteps, whispers, and cruel laughter. The trees seemed to move. The path twisted. Shadows followed him. But somehow, through desperation or luck, Akin burst out of the forest and fell on the dusty ground at the edge of the village, still clutching the mat. The next morning, Akin woke up to sounds of surprise outside his hut. When he stepped out, he found piles of gold, livestock filling his compound, and servants offering him gifts. His farmland, once cursed, suddenly flourished with huge yams and ripe fruits. In one night, Akin became the richest man in Apeyori village. Villagers now bowed when he walked by. Chiefs invited him to council. Traders begged for his attention. Children sang songs about him. Akin's wife and daughter danced with joy. But Akin felt something else. At night, as he slept, he heard distant crying. A cry that grew closer each night. One night, thunder rumbled though the sky was clear. Ayabami shook Akin awake. "Akin, do you hear that?" Akin didn't want to answer. It was the same cry. Mournful, broken, angry. It came from outside their hut. Akin stepped out, lantern in hand. There, standing at the edge of his compound, was Egbèrè. His eyes glowed, and tears streamed down his face. But this time, Egbèrè was not crying softly. He was screaming. The huts trembled. The livestock fled. The wind howled. Egbèrè stretched out a hand and hissed, "Return my mat, or your tears will replace mine." Terrified, Akin slammed the door and hid the mat under his bed. But Egbèrè visited again. And again. And again. Every night, Akin's wealth grew. And every night, his peace was eaten away. Soon, he stopped sleeping. stopped smiling, stopped eating. The villagers came to celebrate him, but he was always sweating, always shaking. His wife begged him to explain. He refused. His daughter touched his face one night and whispered, "Papa, why are you crying?" Akin had no answer. He realized then that his tears had replaced the spirits. One terrible night, the wailing became unbearable. Akin stepped outside with the mat in his hands, trembling like a leaf. Egbèrè stood under the moonlight, his eyes blazing. "Why do you torment me?" Akin cried. Egbèrè answered with a voice like thunder and wind. "You took what was never meant for you. Wealth stolen from sorrow brings only sorrow." Akin fell to his knees. "Take it back." But the spirit shook his head. "You must return it where you took it, deep within the forest from which you stole it." Akin froze. He knew what that meant. He must face the same forest, the same dangers, and the spirit itself. But he agreed. Akin journeyed back to the forbidden forest. The night was darker than any he had seen. The trees murmured, the wind mocked, and shadows followed his steps. When he reached the exact spot where he'd stolen the mat, Egbèrè appeared before him, crying softly once again. Akin placed the mat on the ground and stepped back. Egbèrè picked it up gently, hugging it like a lost child. The forest fell silent. Egbèrè looked at Akin and whispered, "Your wealth will fade, but your life will remain, this time." Then the spirit vanished into mist. By morning, Akin's wealth disappeared, gold gone, livestock vanished, farmland returned to its barren state. Villagers mocked him again. But Akin did not fight them. He simply said, "Wealth from tears brings only sorrow." He returned to farming, accepted his humble life, and lived peacefully with his family. Though poverty returned, his heart finally found rest. Moral of the story: greed blinds the heart. Wealth gained through forbidden paths brings sorrow. Honor the unseen, respect the spirits,